Hello, bastard viewers and people who've never heard of me before. I'm your professionally miserable host, Winkers, and this is my Manifesto season review. It's a pretty simple topic, and the manifestos have been out for a while now, except for the Curse Manifesto, so I'll be trying to summarize the results of all this as efficiently as possible. That said, there's a bit to break down, so let's get into it. First thing to say, GGG coming out ahead of the release to talk about the big changes one advance has honestly felt pretty good from the player's perspective, and with the community as scrutinizing and demanding as can be, they seem to be making an effort to give as much as they feel they can. That is to say, the vision is definitely still there, but I can optimistically say that the needs of the players is a brush helping paint the picture now. I've already talked about the Arch Nemesis Manifesto though, you can find that at the glowing icon right here. Jewel and Ailment Mitigation. GGG opens up with a solid offering stating that we're going to get some more ailment fixing options on jewels. This is pretty much universally useful, unless you're stacking crit multi, I think. Most builds should be able to fit these modifiers in for what is a very small loss of damage in the grand scheme of things, and you can still fix ailments in more expensive ways later. Big win for SSF, marginal win for trade. There's been concerns from the community that things will be harder to craft because of this, and honestly I don't doubt it. For instance, elemental or lightning weighting from fossils or harvest might now pick up reduced shock effect on you, diluting the possibility of getting a great lightning jewel. On the other hand, if you can make use of reduced shock effect, this still has the potential to be pretty awesome. There are a lot of very easy ways to get 50 to 60% reduced effect of shock or chill, so having a big roll on a jewel, which it goes up to 35%, will likely be well received. Maybe even well enough received for it to be your endgame fix. GGG is also culling the less exciting unique jewels. I tend to consider this overall a very, very good idea, as finding a unique jewel is something I personally find to be a frustrating experience. It's always garbage, except for when it isn't, but it isn't very often. The big hitters like Lionized Fall, Unnatural Instinct, and Inspired Learning are all more or less guaranteed to stay. Unfortunately, Quest Reward jewels are getting hit by this and will be removed. On the other hand, Mana Reservation is entering the core pool of jewel modifiers, which means that getting more out of your jewels than ever before is likely possible, at least for Mana Reservation, because you could only run one Conqueror's efficiency anyway. As a separate aside, for the minion folks out there who like their Golem jewels, these are no longer dropped, but instead are going to have a vendor recipe, that's right. Assuming it's not prohibitively expensive, this is a tremendous win for SSF, and probably even a decent win for trade. Making an ingredient for the primordial jewels be something relatively rare, but otherwise not valuable, could be a way to make something that already drops much more exciting. Eldritch Altars. I was expecting some serious doom and gloom to come from the Eldritch Altars manifesto, as they were already seen by much of the community to be the best or one of the best sources of income while mapping. Instead, GGG came out of the gate with a Mike Tyson-style right hook saying, Maven Witness map bosses can drop Awaken Gems. What? Are you insane? Yes, they are, and we're finally profiting for it. These Awakened Gems from map bosses are going to be somewhat rare, of course. It really only takes the occasional drop to make the maps between a Maven encounter much more exciting and profitable, though. As for altars, there is a bit of nerfage, but you can tell by the concessions on GGG's part that they're trying their damnedest to keep it from hurting anyone. The big numbers change is that instead of spawning 60 influence packs, you'll get 20 to 60 influence packs from an altar. However, we're getting 50% more altars as a trade-off. Now I need to say something. I am a sucker for high variance. I love the idea of some maps being quick and easy, and then others making what we had before look like a joke, because that will be able to happen. Imagine the map where you get 50% more altars as expected, but high roll on the added packs each time. You're going to get flooded, and it's going to be a good time. When it's not a good time, the map will be over much more quickly, so unless map drops are messed with in a bad way, this is almost certainly going to be something we feel is simply an improvement. It's important to note that Arch Nemesis is being reined in, and that mapping as a whole will almost certainly be a smoother experience regardless. Additional changes to altar content are generally things to be optimistic for. Gone are the bubblegum currency drops, and in their place we're getting more specific drops, like div card drop rewards being div cards of a specific type, or currency drops of a specific type as well. Reward options that give the map boss more drops are being buffed also, to combat the boss rushing meta that has evolved. They say numerical values are being changed to make them more comparable, which I do worry could be the snake in the sand of the whole manifesto. If this is a sneaky way of saying the Eldritch Minions modifiers are being nerfed heavily, GGG will definitely be earning a fresh burst of community outcry, as well as an angry follow-up video from yours truly. But considering the nerf yet to be talked about, I feel that's unlikely. Wrath of the Cosmos and its twin Eldritch Gaze are being changed to only affect Eldritch Altars matching their type. What's more, Wrath of the Cosmos specifically is being completely reworked, which means Eldritch currency is probably going to be less common. Overall, though, this means little unless you were taking both Keystones before. I think you'll find that what happened to Wrath of the Cosmos is a pretty small concern, as we're getting something brand new and wholly unexpected. Rusted Scarabs in the core drop pool. Yay. I love Scarabs, you love Scarabs. We both love that in addition to Rusted Scarabs entering the core drop pool, you'll also be able to do a new 3-to-1 upgrade recipe at vendors as well. Also, the 3-to-1 will have a button in your fragment stash tab like with essences. This is, again, another bigger win for SSF, but still a happy occurrence for anyone in trade. I have to applaud GGG for looking at Eldritch Altars, being as careful as they could, while they culled the really crazy stuff, and then giving us something to be excited about as well. As a final note, Eldritch Altars will now pop up on your minimap. Yeah! This didn't bother me much personally, but I know for some of you it's probably the biggest piece of good news in the whole manifesto. Also, the Rusted Scarabs drop rate is going to be a little less than Rogue Markers, but I mean, you can still get them from elsewhere. It's just going to be a better kind of currency drop, and that's the one I'm probably most excited about. Could you tell? Curses. Curses were a worry from the start, because I don't think there was much player concern about curses as was. If you follow GGG for a while, you know the things they fix that aren't really broken are often left in a state more frustrating than before, and I feel like we may be looking at it again here. All of that said, curses against significant bosses are going to be a lot better. Significant bosses being your map bosses and pinnacle bosses. This isn't debatable. Everyone who wants to kill bosses just got a sizable buff to their DPS and, in the case of Enfeeble, an even more sizable buff to their EHP. That said, GGG doesn't want Blasphemy or Curse on hit effects to be too strong, which raises severe concerns, as it's already stated that hexes in particular will be worse against weaker enemies. Why is that a big deal? Well, Blasphemy on Enfeeble and or Temp Chains is a really fantastic way to solve mapping survivability in some builds, and we may be seeing a tremendous nerf to that strategy overall. I cannot be certain that this is a problem in the big picture, however, as there's likely other ways for those builds to get their defenses up to par for general content, and they'll be much stronger against bosses if they can handle self-casting the curse. As an additional note on the self-casting of curses, there is a new Hexmaster Keystone. Hexes having infinite duration at the cost of 20% effect is an interesting trade-off. I've played a lot of builds where I self-cast curses. I kind of like doing it. I like having just the full effect of them all the time. But there are builds where you just don't have time for it. Now, if your build doesn't have time for it, you can still self-cast. And at 20% less effect, a level 20 curse is probably still going to be better than something you would get on hit. So this is really good for builds that don't have any issues while mapping, and only need to throw out the curses on really tough enemies. While we're talking about new toys, the Anathema Moonstone ring was teased in the manifesto, and this is of special note because it's the first ring we've ever had that's strictly better than a Dodri's Damning. With no investment, this thing gives you 2 additional curses before hitting the limit. That's massive, especially for builds that can make use of it, which is most of them. T1 unique? Very possibly. We'll have to see. In the same breath, GGG reassured us that other curse uniques would be getting buffs alongside all of the other changes. Here's a slightly buffed Heretic's Veil, giving you better mana reservation efficiency on your curse blasphemies, and an additional +1 level. Alas, Occultist, my beloved, your beloved, everyone's beloved, has finally been slapped by Chris Wilson's golden nerf pat. Malediction is no longer Malediction because it does not give Malediction. Or Curse Effect. They've more or less severely nerfed the curse side of Occultist, preemptively, seemingly for fear of how strong curses will be against bosses going forward. I'll be honest, this might be warranted. Toxic Rain Occultist is probably going to slap even with the changes, as that skill has a bit of a reputation for scaling especially well with curses already, and now it's much better against bosses. Yeah. For me personally, the more concerning aspects of the manifesto outline changes to vulnerability, despair, and a stabilization of how curses scale. We really, really need details on these, as vulnerability and despair might be the 2 most important damage boosting curses in the entire game. That is to say, skills are balanced around their power, and we're going to see a fresh catastrophe if they were overnerfed without compensation. Seriously, bleed builds already aren't doing that well, and Corrupting Fever doesn't need to be hit very hard to have its status as a prime league starter threatened. Overall, I think the manifestos are a good sign for the game going forward. Every situation in which we lost something was very aggressively accommodated, and potential hidden nerfs aside, I think we're getting a little more than we're losing. And what we're losing are probably things that would have been bad for the game's health long-term in many situations. Curses are a little scary at the moment, especially with the changes to Occultist, but it's a very robust ascendancy, so I doubt it's going anywhere near the realm of unplayability. The only problem I have now is that I have to balance a WoW expansion launch alongside a PoE League launch, and I'm sort of cautiously optimistic for both. Have a good one, Exiles.